上昇の王は高らかに手に取る奇跡の神明を歌う。そうはエクスカリバー。
Welcome, heirs and heiresses, to a very serious guide to the Leper. My name is Lord Glazed Donuts, and we have a lot to unpack, with Darkest Dungeon's heaviest hitter. So, without further ado, break your executioner's sword, sign your last will and testament, and let's get started. The Leper's first ability is Obliterate Body. It can be used from the front 2 ranks to hit either of the front 2 ranks, has absolutely abysmal accuracy, but utterly deletes anything that stands still long enough to get hit by it. This is your bread and butter skill for killing things dead. It's best used on low dodge targets because of the poor accuracy, and it will quickly chew through any frontline enemies you point it at. Very straightforward. The Leper's second ability is Obliterate Masses. It can be used from the front 2 ranks to hit both of the front 2 ranks, has equally abysmal accuracy, and splits the damage of your first ability in half. This is just chop, but split across 2 ranks. It's decent for killing multiple low health targets, finishing an enemy with a couple HP left, or hedging your bets if you don't have a good chance of hitting anything with chop. You won't be using it nearly as often, but it is still situationally useful. The Leper's third ability is Be gone, fuck! It can be used from rank 1 to hit rank 1 with less damage, more accuracy, and a hefty knockback. It also buffs your accuracy for the next 3 rounds. Hypothetically, this is a good skill to open a fight with. The positioning requirements are extremely restrictive, but the accuracy buff should last the rest of the fight, and if the target doesn't resist the move, they'll likely be using weaker skills for the next couple of rounds. Unfortunately, the buff isn't very big and the damage is lackluster. It also really sucks to have equipped if you get surprised or otherwise shuffled out of position 1. Overall, it's a skill that does a lot of good things, but it's very inconsistent. The Leper's fourth ability is Metal Gear Rising. It can be used from any rank to activate a battle-long self-buff. The buff provides a fat increase to accuracy, damage, and crit chance at the cost of debuffing dodge and damage taken. At level 1, the debuffs are proportional to the buffs, but at higher levels you gain more value than you lose. This skill solves the Leper's terminal accuracy problem at the cost of some fairly irrelevant debuffs and an action. The Leper wasn't going to be dodging much anyway, and his HP pool is large enough that 25% more damage still leaves him tankier than many characters. Unfortunately, spending round 1 of the fight to activate this is a substantial drawback. It would be a lot better if you could toggle it between fights or if it was a trinket. For this reason, it's usually only worth it in boss fights. Speaking of abilities that are only useful in boss fights, the Leper's fifth ability is T-Pose. It can be used from the front 3 ranks to activate a battle-long self-buff for more prot, dot resist, debuff resist, and move resist. The Leper also becomes marked upon using this ability. If Revenge is Yin, then Withstand is Yang. Instead of making the Leper a meat grinder, this ability makes him a wall. Like many of the Leper's abilities, however, it has some problems. Again, just like Revenge, it takes a turn to turn on that could be better spent killing something, and using marks is a pretty bad method for tanking. Unlike guards, there's no guarantee that enemies will attack the Leper just because he's marked, making it inconsistent. and enemies that will consistently focus the Leper are the ones that benefit from the mark, meaning that the prot gained by activating the skill will be outclassed by the increased damage of the attacks. Use with caution, but often don't use at all. If you want a skill that you should use, look no further than Solemnity. Solemnity heals both the Leper's health and stress on a single skill, and both values are decently large at all ranks. It can only be used in the front 2 ranks, but you don't want the Leper anywhere else anyways. At the end of a lot of fights, you'll have an enemy that's dead to a dot on their next turn, and in those situations it's great to have skills like this. I always keep it trained when I run the Leper, and it means he's rarely a character I need to be managing with a Vestal or Jester. There's nothing more to add. It's just a really good recovery skill, and you usually want all of your party members to have at least one recovery skill. Let's keep the positivity going with the Leper's final ability, Intimidate. Intimidate can only be used from rank 1, but it has high accuracy and hits all 4 ranks. It does very little damage, removes stealth, and debuffs the target enemy's speed and damage. It also buffs the Leper's speed and marks him for the next 3 rounds. Intimidate is situationally very strong. Removing stealth from something like a Crone is really good, and unlike his other offensive abilities, it has the accuracy to hit consistently. It can also be used to finish off a rank 3 or 4 enemy that the Leper otherwise could not reach. And on top of all this, it buffs speed, a stat that the Leper sorely lacks. The glaring drawback is that it marks the Leper, and unlike Withstand, it doesn't come with a prot bonus to mitigate the additional damage the Leper will be taking. It's still very useful in certain situations, but you need to be aware of what enemies you're fighting before you decide to use it. Moving on to camping skills, we begin with Let the Mask Down. For the low price of just 1 respite point, this skill will reduce the Leper's stress by 25 points. However, it comes with the drawback of inflicting 5 stress damage on every other party member, meaning you only have a net loss of 10 stress across the party. In theory, this could be a really useful camping skill if your Leper has like 90 stress and everyone else has 20 or 30, but in practice this situation will never occur. The Leper is going to be managing his own stress with Solemnity in combat, so in most situations he'll have some of the lowest stress on the team, not the highest. With a cost of just 1 respite point, it might be worth using if you have 1 left over after using all your other skills. Next up is Bloody Shroud, a pretty decent defensive buff. It comes in quite cheap at just 2 respite points and increases the Leper's resistances to Blight, Bleed, Debuff, and Move. These are all good resistances to have. Bleed and Blight are the things that kill the most characters. Sometimes an attack could put your Leper on death's door and apply a dot, and then if Leper goes next in the turn order, he just dies before you have a chance to heal or cure him. So increased resistance to both dot effects in the game is very useful. The move resist is less likely to come up, but just as useful. The Leper needs to be in rank 1 or 2 to contribute to the fight at all, so abilities that push him back, such as Tidal Slam or Deadweight, can be very dangerous. Added move resist lowers the chances that you find yourself in this situation. The Leper's third camping skill is Reflection, and it is really good. Always bring Reflection. For 3 respite points, you stress heal the Leper for 20, buff his accuracy by 10, and buff his crit by 8%. With Encourage healing 15 stress for 2 respite points, the stress heal portion of this ability is practically worth the cost itself. But on top of that, it comes with a thick accuracy buff that brings his base accuracy up from abysmal to average. I don't value the crit chance very highly, but even without it the ability is great, so it's really just an added bonus. Unless you have a lot of accuracy from other sources, I would use this ability every single time I camp. It's outstanding. The Leper's last unique camping skill is Quarantine, and incidentally, it's also very good. At the cost of 3 respite points and 20% of the Leper's max HP, the rest of the party heals 0 to 35 stress. With average RNG, you heal about 50 stress across 3 characters, and that's pretty good for 3 respite points. The cost to the Leper's health is pretty much a non-issue because of Solemnity and his innate large HP pool. If we use Encourage as our stress heal metric again, you're getting over 6 respite points worth of stress healing for half that price. Obviously, that's fantastic. When it comes to itemizing, accuracy is the most important stat in the game for most classes, and the Leper is the poster child for accuracy trinkets. His abysmal accuracy means that any increased hit chance you can get is welcome, making him the only class that I ever run 2 accuracy trinkets on. If you're running a dungeon where accuracy is less critical, then I would supplement 1 accuracy trinket with a tank trinket, so that using Withstand is not quite so much of a risk. Early game trinkets I would equip to the Leper include Reckless Charm, Warrior's Cap, Book of Relaxation, Heavy Boots, Health Stone, Bloodthirst Ring, Life Crystal, and Fortunate Armlet. In the late game, you can swap these out for the Sun or Moon Rings, the Sun or Moon Cloaks, the Focus Ring, the Ancestor's Signet Ring, the Martyr's Seal, and the Petrified Amulet. The Leper's gimmick is that he has the most damage in the game. More damage than Phil Swift.
Now that's a lot of damage!
When you bring a Leper on an expedition, you are sacrificing all utility. Range, stuns, heals, stress heals, damage over time abilities, in exchange for about 30% more damage. This means that the Leper, without damage trinkets, does more damage than any other hero will with a damage trinket. The problem is twofold. First, no matter how much damage you do, you have between 10 and 20 less accuracy than every other damage dealer. 30% more of 0 is still 0. And second, since he brings no utility, your other 3 party members need to pick up his slack. Hey, Bartholomew, I can tell you're having a lot of fun going to town on that Scratcher, but the party and I were hoping you could maybe help us kill that madman in rank 4 first? Rain in the forest. Okay, okay. But maybe if you could rain over there a little? The Leper's saving grace is that he is extremely strong when you back him up with a lot of support. Because of his high damage and low accuracy, he is the best target for damage, accuracy, and crit buffs in the game. He is less useful out of the box, but he scales faster with abilities like Battle Ballad and Weapons Practice. I think this is what causes the divide in the DD community about whether the Leper is good or bad. Players that value utility and versatility know that you can't just slot the Leper into any composition and expect success, so they vilify him. Whereas most of the players I see defending the Leper have anecdotes of him one-shotting everything in a team that stacked 3 or 4 different buffs on him. And both groups are right. Versatility is an important attribute to have in Darkest Dungeon, and the Leper's lack of it is a substantial weakness. But it is also true that if you are willing to build your party around a single Chad of a character, then Leper is the best possible man for the job.